Welcome back to the Breach Report by PurpleSec. Once again, I'm Joshua, and I'm here with Jason. And this time we have a special guest with us, Ken. He's going to do some deep dives on these NFT breaches that we'll be talking about today. Just a quick overview. We're going to start off with a data breach website which sells data breaches, leaking their own customers' information. Actually, really three major NFT breaches, kind of two in one for one of these here. And we're gonna really dive into those with our buddy Ken here. So we're gonna have a really fun show.
Yeah, your enthusiasm is really coming through on the other end there, Josh. I'm really excited to have Ken here because this is a really special episode, in my opinion. We have our third person to round off, us talking to one another, and this is an expert in this space. Ken, you've been following the NFT, for people who don't know, the non-fungible token space, really since it kind of started getting hyped in the media. Would love to learn a little bit more about you and your background and security and how it kind of relates to the NFT space.
Yeah, no doubt. Thanks for having me on, y'all. And I've been, a longtime listener and really, grateful to be here with everybody. I got started on the NFT side actually back in 2017 with CryptoKitties, and at that time, I didn't have a lot of things invested into the market, but I did see the potential upside of what the technology could do. And then fast forward to 2020, and we started to see a lot more activity start to, kind of pick up in these markets. And so I've been really deeply invested from a time perspective, and money as well, in the Ethereum world of NFTs and trading and all that good stuff. And there's many of the same old problems that we experience in security have found their way into this realm. And so, very much so looking forward to having a conversation about some of the concerns that are out there and what people can do to keep themselves safe as they experiment in this brave new world.
Yeah, excellent. And I think before we jump into the NFT space, we have some information about a WeLeak info dump.
Yeah, this one I pulled this one out because it was kind of interesting. 'Cause it's different from our typical breaches in that it's really malicious people's info being leaked by other malicious people. So it's like hacker on hacker crime, if you will. Kind of funny. So coming to us from Tech Radar, criminal data breach site WeLeakInfo leaked customer payment details. The personal information of 24,000 users who purchased stolen data is now being sold online. So, maybe it's karma, right?
Right.
So the website is now defunct. The FBI took it down in January of 2020. But when it was active, WeLeakInfo sold access to stolen information scraped from over 10,000 data breaches. In total, the site contained 12 billion indexed user credentials that include names, usernames, email addresses, and passwords for online accounts. So you can go to this website. It says here, well, this is from the breach, but prior to this, you could go to this website here and buy all these credentials. So somebody took their customers' information, shared it for $2 in virtual foreign currency for the entire leak, which is pretty cheap, $2. This included their full names, IP addresses, partial credit card data, and transaction dates. And this came from Stripe payment, so Stripe reference numbers and phone numbers. Interesting thing to note here is that only Stripe users were affected. So anybody who used PayPal or any other way of paying for these data leaks did not get their information leaked. How this came about was so the forum user selling this says that the FBI possibly missed one of the domains when they seized this website.
They missed
Uh,
the domain. What does that
yeah,
mean? So they didn't account for one, and that's what enabled this.
yeah. So it's possible that maybe the domain was hosted like really remotely with some weird name and was meant to be a backup, or you know possibly something like that. Um, we were kind of discussing this beforehand, and Ken, I think you disagree with this a little bit, or at least find this kind of suspect. Which I kind of do too. Seems.
Yeah, it's one of those things when you're dealing with the internet, all of the underlying technology stack is connected. So to that end, if you have a piece of infrastructure deployed on the web, no matter how, separate it is, you can put a graph together of what the nodes are. And from there, you can then say what the relationships are of those nodes potentially would be. But the idea that from an investigative standpoint, that a federal agency went in there and, overlooked the domain, I have a suspicion that there could be more to it. Perhaps there's maybe a greater organization at work, or perhaps a different breach site that's out there that somehow they share information with or share a customer database with. So that could be possible, but from a payment gateway standpoint, I would really be suspect at the idea that our federal agents wouldn't be able to, do these most basic of investigation whenever they're looking at potential breaches, because they've been successful this whole time up until now.
Oh
So
yeah.
yeah, like what happened, if that is indeed and in fact what took place.
I mean, we're talking about the agency that has the ability to, perform network timing attacks to track people down on the Tor network, right? So,
Sure.
yeah, I'm with you there. That seems weirdly, I don't know, lazy for the FBI.
Right.
And I think it does make more sense that maybe we have like a black market, like information exchange, right, on the back end. I mean, why not? Legitimate business does it, right? Facebook sells your data to other people. So, I mean, if you're running a breach site, why not also do back channel sales too to other breach sites?
One thing that I saw there, the virtual forum currency, did they mention what that was, or because I didn't capture that?
No, they didn't mention specifically in this article, and I searched around for more information on this and couldn't find anything more specific than this about the breach. So we don't really know. Virtual forum currency.
Interesting.
Yeah. Um,
One thing that is kind of worth noting here is that Stripe is the most valuable payment processing company in the world. They, I believe last Sunday, about a week ago, they had closed $600 million in funding. That pushed the valuation of the company up to $95 billion. That tripled it from $36 billion in April of 2020. So, I mean, it's very interesting that it's Stripe users specifically, and coming right off the cusp of this new valuation, and I mean, they're big players in this market. Makes me wonder if this is a little bit more targeted.
Interesting.
it's definitely targeted, I would say. I mean, it's a pretty specific customer base. This sentence I highlighted here kind of sheds a little more light on it too. Says, their payment site was not allowed to expire in March this year, and as a result, anyone could have claimed the domain as their own, which is exactly what the hacking forum user did. So yeah, they had another domain, and it's possible it was found and taken down, but somehow it was allowed to stay up past expiration. I'm not really sure how that happens. Seems like a user error. maybe.
Well,
Maybe
one
just a
thing I,
mistake.
I I do know on the registrar side is, depending upon who you have and the relationship that you have with them, with that registrar, you can register a domain after it's been expired, where they don't just automatically turn it over to the open market. Like there will be like a 30-day, 60-day, 90-day settling period depending upon the company. So perhaps it was something like that, and then the person went through the claim process and was able to convince the registrar that, hey, I'm this person, or I'm the actual valid owner of the domain, and you need to turn it over to me. And then at that point, it was just really waiting for other payments to kind of come through.
Interesting. So the implications here are kind of interesting. The people who actually purchased the stolen data, they committed a crime, and the information contained in this database could actually be used by law enforcement. So if they go back after this guy, which I'm assuming they're going to,
Oh, he's already found.
yeah. Oh, I'm sure. So and they're gonna get that data, which means they now know who bought all of that stolen data. So those people are probably gonna see some FBI at their door at some point too.
Yeah.
Don't buy data. Don't buy data breaches unless you're a research team. I'll tell you that. That's how you prevent this from happening. But
Yeah, I wrote down on under solutions, don't engage in criminal activity.
that's always a good start. Don't be a criminal.
So that's a good primer. Interesting story there. We're going to move on to, I think, the big reason why we have Ken on. We're going to be talking about NFTs and we're going to be talking about crypto. And one of the things as kind of like a layman's person in this whole world of crypto is like, you read about these hacks and it's like, wow, I could have my Bitcoin stolen, or I could have my Ethereum stolen, or this or that. And people get scared about that from crypto. And of course, the caveat is, well, the banks can always hit delete on your bank account too. Like, yes, it's FDIC insured and everything, but I mean, it's the same kind of system in the back end. But I'll let you take this one away, Josh.
Yes, this one's coming to us from The Record by Recorded Future. It says DNS hijacks at 2 cryptocurrency sites are pointing the finger at GoDaddy again. So this is Cream Finance and PancakeSwap. The 2 cryptocurrency portals, are currently dealing with DNS hijacking attacks that are redirecting users to fake versions of their websites, where crooks are trying to collect seed phrases and private keys from visitors so they can access wallets to steal their funds. On March 15th, when this started, Cream Finance first tweeted, "Our DNS has been compromised by a third party. Some users are seeing requests for seed phrase on app.cream.finance. Do not enter your seed phrase. We will never ask you to submit any private key or seed phrases." And then PancakeSwap goes on to quote them and confirm that they too are being hit by a DNS hijack, the same as Cream is. So make sure you don't use the website. So the first question I have right away is, what is this seed phrase, and why are the hackers looking for this, and what does this mean for the end users if they end up putting it in here?
Well, there's like 2 sort of like high level things to start with on this side. The site or the portals, as they refer to them, from a terminology standpoint, they are technically a DeFi exchange or a decentralized finance exchange. And what that means is that you can use these 2 sites that are indicated, cream.finance and PancakeSwap, to gain exposure to certain markets without needing to go through a traditional exchange. And one way to kind of think of, I guess, a traditional exchange would be like Robinhood, even though they technically, you don't hold your crypto there. They're just like a custodian in a sense. Coinbase, Bitstamp, Kraken, any of these sites, these are your traditional ones where you have to supply typically, a photo ID. You have to prove that, you are who you say you are, and as well that you're not some criminal or part of some terrorist organization. And so that's kind of like the whole spirit behind KYC, or know your customer. In this case, why they would want the seed phrase or these private keys. In crypto, we have a famous saying. That saying is, not your keys, not your crypto. And what that means is that all of the operations that take place on the various blockchain networks that we're interacting with are fundamentally cryptographic operations that require your private key in order for you to access your funds or to access your underlying value that's contained in your wallet, be it MetaMask or Ledger or whatever you may be using. Now, understandably, there's a lot of terms that are just kind of flying by for folks that are brand new. But the main takeaway here is you can think of your private key is analogous to your SSH private key or your passphrase or your PGP key. Like these are things that you do not want to communicate to anybody, because at that point in time, your entire ability to have confidentiality is now going out the window, along with integrity. So we have the
the whole CIA triangle, really. I mean,
exactly.
They can take away your availability too. So yeah.
But that's just the whole thing, is that the private key, the way that the seed phrase works, the seed phrase is what the wallet uses. It's just either it's like a 12 or 24 mnemonic phrase that is used to reconstruct a private key. And so every time that you first go out there and you create a wallet, they'll give you this mnemonic phrase. Typically it's 12. You write down these 12 phrases, and then the way that they verify is they'll either ask you to type in all 12 of the words, or they'll ask you to, they'll say, type in these 2 words, like word number 2, word number 12, or whatever it may be. And then you do that. And that's a way to prove to the wallet software that, here's the private keys that are supposed to correspond to these underlying funds. Now, if you ever lose that key, or you ever lose that mnemonic phrase, and you can't, remember your password, your funds are gone for all intents and purposes. And so that is why there was this big push from the attackers to, let's get the people's keys, let's get them to submit either their mnemonic seed phrase or the private key itself, or both, because the more data, the better, sort of thing. But yeah, the whole point was to get money, or to capture whatever the underlying value of the wallets that would have been, available via these private keys, these seed phrases.
Interesting. So I mean, they're basically trying to get full access to your crypto and your NFT, whatever it is that you have on these platforms here.
Absolutely.
So
And this is something we see too, even with like MetaMask, where the main website is like metamask.io, but then you go on Google, depending upon what day of the week it is, there may be a non-MetaMask site that has made it to page 1, or may even be the #1 result, for that day, right? And so yeah, they try to get people to, oh well, hey, you're on MetaMask now, give us your seed phrase, and boom, the attack just repeats itself.
and malicious SEO is becoming I'm really starting to see a lot more of that too, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's been in the landscape for quite a while,
Right.
because it's anyone can fool an algorithm. I mean, at the end of the day, it's an algorithm, right? And so you can fool Google for a little bit by, there's these ranking factors that, like links, or certain type of keywords that you're using on your pages. And there's a lot of black hat tactics that you can use, at least in the end term, to elevate your site up like that pretty quickly. And it might float around for a week or 2 or something like that before Google's like, hey, hold on, this isn't right. There's some malicious stuff going on there, but it takes time. And because the crawler has to crawl the site, index it, and then when is Google going to crawl that site again? It becomes a resource thing, where they're like, well, there's trillions of web pages out there. We're not going to crawl every web page out there on the web every single day. And even if we did, we would still miss the hundreds of millions of pages that get published live every day. So it's impossible to really combat these types of things. And you would think that if you're searching on Google and you click on something, that it's not going to take you to a malicious link, because it has algorithms. It can detect when malicious software and stuff like that is present on these pages. But it's not infallible. Tech isn't infallible, and people are clever, and there's always a way around it.
Absolutely.
What's interesting here is they didn't even have to use that. They actually were able to change the DNS records for both websites, whoever these hackers were, which is, I mean, you don't even have to play the games with the SEO then, as
Yeah.
far as I understand, is you're just piggybacking on it and you're just basically man-milling them. So the DNS records are actually pointing to attackers' IP addresses. We have a couple examples here if you ran a who is on this date to these websites. Um,
Yeah, change of addresses like that. It's interesting that I don't know what the time horizon was for something like that, but obviously there must have been like a second. How did they get access to the DNS, right? So
right.
Oh,
there must have been.
GoDaddy.
Yeah, exactly, right. So there was that first stage of the attack, and then the second stage is hey, we're going to point everything to it. But yeah, I mean, yeah, if you have the DNS records, you just point all of that SEO juju to that new page, and it's just going to say, oh, this URL changed. From a Google's perspective, it's like, oh, maybe you changed your URL. That happens all the time. You rebrand or something like that, and it just puts all of that power behind it, and it starts ranking.
One thing of note on both of these stories or both of these compromises, even though let's say that it went through GoDaddy and it could have been potentially a employee credential was compromised, or any other method where there was a drift in security. There are still websites and solutions out there where you can monitor your DNS from a security perspective to verify that things are what they're supposed to be. So you have services like Mark Monitor or Infoblocks that will alert you, hey, if something happens from a configuration standpoint, resolving names, they'll give you an alert. They'll let you know. And what this tells me from, let's just say, if I put my investor hat on and I start looking at these different projects that are out there, when we and by we I mean like in the security world, when we go to determine the authenticity of a host, typically we have a number of websites and methodologies that we kind of step through to validate that. When we do this on the crypto side, we typically we'll check out their GitHub, we'll check out their white paper, we'll look at how they're interfacing with the community. But this there's a there's a need to do some of these like these cyber security basics in terms of from like a hygiene check and making sure that, hey, is this website hosted through a reputable host? Do they have appropriate monitoring in place if there's some drift in their security? What is their backup solution? For both of the sites, they were able to go to IPFS, and IPFS stands for the Interplanetary File System. They quite literally, that name is a literal um, uh, intention or implementation of the tech. And the idea behind it is that, if I want to send you a file and we're both in the same, network, why do we need to traverse the entire internet for my file to go, to you when I can just send it across our local link? And so IPFS is very good, for those type of solutions, those sort of peer-to-peer solutions. But to that whole end, IPFS could have been used from the start, and it's something that from the web perspective, there's still a lot of maturity and growing up, if you will, that we all have to kind of go through. Not just only in the crypto space, but the internet as a whole community.
Yeah, it's really becoming apparent that I think the classic internet is getting just too hard to defend almost. I almost don't want to say that, but it sort of feels like it some days because these types of attacks are getting worse and worse, and trust is at, I think, an all-time low. I mean, people barely even trust Microsoft anymore. We've got
Right.
all these ransomware attacks. So you know, I think one of the ideas behind, NFT or blockchain is, you can kind of migrate to a new type of internet that's a little bit more validated, right?
Absolutely. One, I mean, the real the like what I like to focus on here is that we're utilizing all of these Web3 technologies in sort of the separate ways. So we have, IPFS over here. We're doing ENS names over there, which is the Ethereum name system. And
So like DNS for Ethereum blockchain.
yeah, it's a way, though it's a little bit more flexible too than DNS, but it's a way of resolving names to wallet addresses or a smart um, you know a smart application or
Mhm.
any of these different things that are out there. So you can there's the I just bring this up because there's all these different ways to tie and juxtapose these technologies together, but it requires us to kind of go through the motions, if you will, and figuring out where the best fit for certain technologies are, and where it makes the most sense at.
So I like that we're talking about this right now, because I want to kind of cover this scenario that they're describing here with GoDaddy kind of being to blame. So
Right.
what they're saying might have happened is the GoDaddy employee's account may have been compromised and used to change DNS records. Something that's already happened twice in 2020, March and November, with attackers executing a phishing attack against GoDaddy employees to collect their work credentials, and then use official GoDaddy accounts to modify DNS records for multiple cryptocurrency and domain hosting related sites. So I mean, that's our traditional, you have to have a host and a DNS and all that. So let's say we're moving to, a blockchain based internet and, something on ENS. Would that have prevented an attack like this, or at least mitigated the chances of something like this happening? Or is, phishing the human factor still going to very much be at play in this?
I mean, phishing absolutely that will be at play until the end of the universe, sort of thing. But and we in the security realm, we have to be completely cognizant of where our weak points are at. And so in this case, it definitely was the human element. And to the whole end, the decentralized nature of the Web3 would have most certainly helped, but it wouldn't. I don't want to make it seem as if you put your stuff on IPFS and ENS that you are now unhackable.
Nothing's
Um,
unhackable.
exactly. I mean,
We know that.
you can still be targeted, you can still be phished. Someone could have all sorts of creative ways to get keys out of you, but there's also different ways to store keys so that you aren't the only person that holds access to a wallet, for example. You can make it such that you have what's known as a multi-sig wallet, and it requires multiple signatures in order to do an operation. So,
Interesting.
right. And that way you can then start to do things like tie a wallet to an organization, and then that organization can have like a governance structure behind it, and they could use the wallet for, whatever their funding needs are, that sort of thing. But the whole point being is you can have these extra layers of security that are baked into the Web3, and
Yeah.
are just kind of afforded to you simply by being present on that network. So,
So that's interesting. The like multi-key holder concept, right? Because even if you manage to fish 1 or 90%, you still have to have 100% to actually gain access, right? So it becomes significantly more complicated by orders of magnitude to break into something like that. If you had, say, just 4, key holders, really would be a lot harder.
right, it would in the multi-sig example, it would really be dependent upon whatever the conditions of that wallet are. Sometimes they'll have a thing where, let's say there's 3 keys that have to be signed, and
Right.
there's a provision that you only need 2 out of 3, that sort of thing. So again, it's not necessarily a cure-all, but there are absolutely mechanisms in play or in place that you can use to secure yourself and to make it that much more difficult for an attacker to seize your funds or do things as your identity on the Web3.
So this is a great segue into the next breach that we were going to cover, which is coming to us from The Verge. Hackers stole NFTs from Nifty gateway users. So this is a separate platform again. Now this one differs from the previous two in that this was not a coordinated DNS attack or anything technical. But what Nifty is saying is all of these accounts had 2FA enabled. So the statement here from Nifty says, Nifty Gateway team is communicating with a small number of users who appear to have been impacted by an account takeover. Our analysis is ongoing, but our initial assessments indicate that the impact was limited. None of the impacted accounts had two-factor authentication enabled, and access was attained via valid account credentials. So what we're talking about here is probably a pretty lightweight brute force attack from reused credentials somewhere, gaining access, and none of these people had two-factor authentication. So in kind of in contrast of what we were just talking about, right? This is the totally wrong way of doing it, of having only your username and password is access to, in this guy's case, $150,000 worth of things stolen.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, and the thing, it's very interesting. The CEO of Nifty Gateway about a month ago was on Twitter having an active discussion towards this very problem, and saying like, "Hey, do we need to force 2FA on our users? Do we need to force that as an option?" In
Yes,
my in my
everybody does.
in my personal opinion, I say no, and
Oh,
not because, yeah, and here's my reasoning on that. Security as a affordance or something that enables a sort of level of protection, for you. In order for that protection to make sense or for you to fully reap the rewards of it, you have to choose to have that protection. If I live in a house and my front door, or like the area where my door would be, it's just some open hole, and that's okay. Well, that works within my whole system of being. But if I all of a sudden decide that I need to have doors now, I'm tired of just letting the wind come in and out of my house, at will. Well, now it's my choice to put a door in. But if someone just shows up and says, "Here's this door. We don't like wind and cats and insects going in and out of your abode," where's my personal freedom? Where's my choice in that? So people, the whole point behind that diatribe is that people have to select security for themselves. And there's a
yeah.
there's a true side of that. We also have to evangelize security to users, right? We have to let them know that, hey, here's how you can protect yourself. Here's potentially the downside if you don't, and here's the upside if you do. And then we have to allow them to choose for themselves.
You make a really interesting point here because, it's kind of this is the human factor element, right? And the kind of a psychological factor is if you do force security on people, then do they actually have to think about it, right? So if they're making the conscious
Right.
decision, then you're talking about being security conscious in your own mind and going, okay, I know that I need to do something secure and I'm going to do it. And, there's that kind of experience does stick with you. I mean, that's something that you commit to memory a lot more than just, oh, this thing that's in my way. So I
So I want to
really see
throw
that
a
point.
wrench in all of this a little bit here.
Let's go for it.
So two-factor, in my opinion. So first of all, I like the idea behind it. It makes a lot of sense of enable people to make the decision, because then they're cognizant of, hey, I'm being more secure.
Right.
But let's take a product like Gmail, for example, like their spam filter. What if it was that selector? What if I had the choice to say, I want all the spam, give me all of the spam? Well, I mean, that wouldn't be very efficient for my inbox, right? I mean, I'd have to sit there and go through all the clutter. There'd be a lot of malicious stuff that would come through. And so in my mindset, two-factor authentication is kind of like a modern day version of a spam filter, where it's like, it's the baseline, right? And I think that there's so many different mechanisms in our lives that require two-factor, like our banking or most of our work these days, that it's starting to become ingrained in society of, okay, we do this. And it's one of those things where I do see the little bar at the top of the apps that I'm using that says, you don't have two-factor, we highly recommend it, we encourage you to do it. And I'm like, okay, yes, thank you for that prompt, I need to set this up. Maybe that's what it's saying. It's saying you have to set this up, but
Right.
forcing it on the user, I don't think is necessarily a bad thing, though, because yes, we want people to have choice in their security, but for something that's this basic that could help, prevent, people losing $150,000 worth of stuff, I don't think they would have said, well, I would have liked the choice. This guy who got hacked was probably saying, well, I would have actually liked if they enforced it to begin with, because then I would have had all my stuff.
So it's, you mentioned Gmail, and you actually can do that with the spam. The spam filter is an opt out, right? So you can start putting stuff back into your inbox, and maybe that's kind of the balance right there between both of your points of view, right? Of forced versus unforced. What if it's not forced, but it's opt out, right? So, we were talking about this S3 buckets being public last. I think it was on last breach, right? So those now don't get set up public anymore. You actually have to kind of opt into that. So whereas before it was you had to opt into being private, it's now being opting into being public. That's actually my preference. I prefer that things start locked down. It's like, okay, I'm going to open it up to the level that I'm free with, that I'm comfortable with. It seems to be a little bit easier to whitelist than to blacklist.
That's a good idea. And also what you two said, Jason, I don't know if this was your intent, but this is what I caught, to use negative user experience feedback within the UI to say, hey, you don't have 2FA enabled, put like a big red bar up at top or something to that extent to say, this is bad, and at least call it out, because at that point in time, if the person sees this bar, they get the psychology, the negative feedback loop kind of kicked off in their head and going, oh no, look, a red bar, and then they still choose to not have 2FA, it's on them at that point, but
Absolutely.
yeah, they're definitely, that's a very good idea. I like that a lot. I like
it's
that
about reducing friction, right? Because security is always friction. It's going to take me longer to access the stuff I want.
It's people are going to take the path of least resistance. This is something I learned.
Exactly. Yeah.
So if you make the path of least resistance the correct path, right, then people are going to tend towards the correct path. By correct, I mean, the more secure, the whatever it is that you consider the right way. Something I think that it's really time for, and I've been following though, is like passwordless authentication, right? The era of the password really needs to die. Passwords have gotten complicated. You have to enter 14 characters and all this crazy stuff, which is hard for users to remember, which honestly leads to more, people won't turn on stuff. So like, dude, I already got to remember this giant stupid password, right? Maybe I don't want to deal with Authy or something like that. So there's a platform that just came out with passwordless. So you could do 100% tokens, right? So you could use a YubiKey and then an Authy key, or you could use your fingerprint and an Authy key, right? So you don't actually ever have to type a physical password in, which I think is really cool. And I think that's where things need to start going. I've got like 5 YubiKeys at home, and that would be awesome. Just have a little combination of keys as your password, for example. Something like that would be really neat.
How does that fit into the something something you are, and something you have? Is the YubiKey that's something you have, right? So does that break down any of that security in the authentication process?
I think it starts to change the traditional way that we think of it. Yeah. I think what's more important than them being, the biometrics and a password, is some other form of identification, right? Like maybe what you do is it's your YubiKey, which YubiKeys now also have thumbprint things on them. They also have near field communication chips in them if you want. So one thing you can actually do is plug your YubiKey into your laptop and beep a smart card over it, or even your NFT enabled cell phone. Or if you're one of those cool hacker dudes who puts the NFT chips in your arm or your hand, you could beat that on there, right? So that solves multi-factor right there. Or it could honestly be a combination of, I put these two different YubiKeys into this PC, and that PC has a unique identifier. That combination of the two keys together creates a nice clean chain of authentication, at least, for that. And you could add more things like, okay, now you also have to put in your username at least, right? So, we're saying username and keys or something like that.
It's going to be hard to get to that point, though. People like their passwords. It's easy, right?
So
it doesn't take a whole thing.
Yeah, to highlight that point, I was following one of the tweets off of that Verge article, right? This is a person who lost $150,000 worth of things. And so somebody rightfully asked him on his tweet, can I ask why you wouldn't have 2FA on something so valuable? I'm not trolling, serious question. What the advantage or rationale for not turning that feature on? A very good question, a question I had right away. And this response is kind of what we're talking about and about to be expected, right? It's because when I created the account, they required Authy and I didn't have it downloaded and it was in a rush. I use Google Auth typically. So I said I'd circle back and do it later, and I never did. Human factor, all this stuff is great, but even what you're talking about, Ken, with the configuration stuff, anything that requires configuration requires somebody to be security conscious, for sure.
Yeah, the thing here to note, and this is more so from the NFT side, is there's for almost like a Cambrian explosion of minds and activity. And I've been on the internet, to kind of date myself, well, really since it's been in the public domain. So I've been on the internet since the 80s. I saw the .com boom and bust. I remember when everything had an E appended to it, E this and E that.
Yeah.
And
I had an E-Machines computer.
right. Right. And so I've seen a lot of these similar cycles, and I'll just say this, that in respect to what's happening within the NFT space and the Web3, I have never seen anything like this. And so we have to keep in mind that people people are human beings, and they have the features and then they have the defects of that. And the reason I bring this up is there's a huge, almost like a gold rush to find, oh, well, what's the next angle to this, or the next flip.
It almost legitimizes it, right? Like that's kind of how I see it. It's like, wow, people are hacking this now. That means, it must be legit enough, right? Because there's enough of a customer base.
Just where the money
I like
is,
that.
right?
Yeah.
But the whole thing though is people within the space, need to take time to stop, breathe, make sure everything in their life is good to go. Because if you're not already a person like ourselves, who is used to a constant garbage fire going on in the background,
Yeah.
it can be a weird sort of psychological thing to deal with, and you're thinking, I got to do this right now. I've got to sign in here right now, like, no.
Oh, that's a really good point. And I think it's a good thing for
down.
organizations to think. Yeah, there's always a rush to like defend yourself from stuff, right? Or if you're on blue team, you need to have some patience, because yes, the malicious actors, the red team, they are rushing to try to break into your stuff like any good thief or criminal is, right? But if you don't slow down and implement things correctly, you're building up technical debt. Technical debt becomes exponentially expensive, especially when it becomes this is technical debt. We didn't implement 2FA and I was going to do it later. And the further off you put it, the more expensive it becomes to fix it. In this guy's case, $150,000. If this is an organization like a giant oil and gas organization, maybe you add 2 or 3 zeros to that number, right?
Right.
I think, Ken, you brought up something that in this space in general is really important, and to highlight the psychology aspect of it. And I'll just touch upon this real quick. There's the NFT space right now. It's a gold rush, right? People are making money, stupid money, 100,
right.
300, 4,000%.
69 million.
$69 million NFTs. But I'm talking about like the average person, right?
Sure.
Where it's like, I could put money into the stock market and make 20%, off of a tech stock, or 6% off of like a value stock over the year. Or I can buy, a fraction of the rights of LeBron James shoes, like as an NFT or something like that. And that's how people are doing this now. In a lot of cases, they'll buy like a fraction of an actual physical product, and then they own part of that product. But it's very emotional. Investing is very emotional. You see the swings go up and down. People cut out when their losses are there, and so when you mix the emotion of trying to chase the market and trying to get all of these sweet gains, plus the psychological component of the security factor in play. I mean, it's actually it seems like it's a pretty perfect target.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, the psychology play is one that it's something that needs to be spoken about more, not only just in the, space of crypto, but overall in security and, just interneting as a whole, because
Internet society.
there's a number of ways that your energy can kind of get misspent or taken away. And if you're not coming at it from that perspective or cognizant that, this is a thing, you're just you're going to have negative outcomes from it, period. And yeah, just to that whole end, like Nifty Gateway was really my entrance into that whole world, because I saw that, hey, look, they're doing all this crazy stuff. You can purchase with a credit card. Beeple was on there, or I mean, still is, but um, there were just all these different things that I was looking at, and I felt very much the same way. But on the same hand, I started to ask those questions. The moment that I got in, and the moment I had money in their system, I was like, okay, do you have 2FA? As a platform, do you notify me if I log on from a totally random IP? Those sort of things. So while we can put a lot of onus on the user from a platform perspective, there are still things that can be enabled to kind of throw up a red flag when things that are suboptimal, if you will, start happening to kind of impede that process, or at very least just confirm with the user, hey, is this what you actually intended to do, and then have them opt into that.
It's a partnership. Security has to be a partnership between
I,
users and
I love that.
organizations.
I love that. I really do, sincerely. Like it, because at the end of the day, it really is like I'm here doing my job at work to enable value for our customers. I want them to essentially, I want them to make money for us so that I can be employed. And that's kind of the relationship that, hey, they're going to go make money, but they're going to have problems along the way, and they're going to need us to help them out, So we don't want to impede their motion or impede their process to the value, but we want to make sure that none of their operations undermine the value as well.
You're almost like a digital bodyguard and sort of like a financial like advisor for your customers, right? It's like, look, I'm here to keep you safe, and if you get shot, there's no more payday for me, for one, but also
Right.
making it safer and more efficient for both of us is a really big thing. And I think that's something a lot of orgs do miss right now, is like I've been seeing security sales, sales driven security has really just pushed out these big, like, here's our baked recipe, and that's what you get, and there's no concierge service, there's nothing really customized to end users. And I think that does actually a disservice at some point, because one size does not fit all with security. It can't possibly. And so if you're trying
Right.
to offer one size fits all, you're going to have people that you do fit, cast a wide net, but a lot of people it's not gonna fit for them, and they have to go search somewhere else, and maybe they won't get the same kind of quality that they could have gotten out of you by going somewhere else, but you weren't able to be flexible. So it's give and take on both sides, really.
Yeah. Just one final thing on the 2FA side. Like, even though we know of, like let's just say within the security community, as a whole. We know that we need these multiple factors of authentication. There's still websites that are out there that provide insurance, that provide healthcare, that provide things that matter, right? That do not have 2FA, that do not have the ability to notify you if you put your password in wrong 15 times, or if you've logged in from two completely separate spots on the planet that are faster than light. And so, there's still so much to be done within the entire industry, and I just want to make it, clear that even if you have providers that are out there doing the right thing, just to your whole point, it's a partnership. Like, we have to be in this together to not only, make money, but to maintain our value, to maintain what we already have.
Yeah, if you don't have a platform that's informing your customers, it's informing, right? Hey, here's what's going on with you. You don't even have to be trying to force them to do something. You just need to be letting them know what's going on. Like, you're doing them a disservice by not having that, honestly, especially if there's something of monetary value on that platform, which these days is everything on the internet. So, and it's not like it's that hard to implement.
It's cost, though. It's not about difficulty. It's never about difficulty.
Yeah, and this is the thing that always kills me in IT and cybersecurity and stuff, is this cost. And because when people say cost, especially organizations, they're talking about right now cost, right? They're like, well, right now it's going to cost this X amount of money to implement, and we don't want to fit that into our budget, right? So it doesn't get done or gets pushed off or whatever it is. But people need to think more and more and more these days about technical debt costs, right? The cost of not doing that thing, the cost of not spending that money right now down the road, when you've got, massive multi-million-dollar ransomware attacks, when you've got, somebody phished the CEO's credentials and managed to steal a bunch of money from the company. Simple things, right, can become very expensive because you chose not to spend the right now costs. So I think that's how we start overcoming this ransomware in the future. Is, I've said it on every breach. We got to start going to things like zero trust. We've got to start using multi-factor more.
I think one thing to kind of bring that part of the conversation together is look at digital transformation over the last 20 years. What industries have adopted to digital? Implementing software into the processes, becoming more lean, more efficient. Again, that bottom line thing. I see security as some type of time horizon down the road where people get that this is a required part of doing business. It's already getting there to some extent, especially when you're doing government contracts or any type of DoD type of stuff where you have to have, your third party vendors have to be vetted. So there is some layers there, but I think it's just it's time, unfortunately. And it's like in all things, you're not going to take it seriously until you get breached.
Well, exactly. So the DoD's been taking it seriously because, well, they've been breached pretty severely a few times. We've had, it really started off with the whole OPM hack with Equip, and from there it just sort of went downhill until they changed their mindset of shifting security left. And this new thing that came out, the CMMC for their contractors, like, that's about as left as you can get. It's like, we want there to be security from the time you sign onto a contract, right? You have to show that you're being secure, and that is a recognition of the cost of technical debt. Is, the government does not like to waste money, especially not the DoD. So, in realizing that, hey, we can spend some upfront money and save millions and millions and millions down the road by being secure now versus, trying to secure stuff that's already deployed, because that's really expensive. I think that mindset needs to really permeate throughout all the industries, and people will realize that it's cheaper and better that way.
Yeah, and a lot of people won't do business with your organization unless you have some level of security, or it's also a selling point, right? And this is where I see security becoming more mainstream, is where we say, hey, we actually have, you can trust to do business with us. We have a managed security service provider. We have a full dedicated SOC. We have a zero trust. You can do business with us on our platform if you're like a web-based platform or something like that. That's the incentive. We are secure. We are going to keep your data private, and we're doing everything we can today within best practices.
And that requires organizations to do good third-party vendor assessments and ask those questions of their third-party vendors.
We kind of went off on a little tangent there, but it's a good discussion, just in security in general. Anything else on the NFT side that you wanted to cover?
I think I've exhausted my expertise on that. Ken, is there anything else you want to bring up about this? This is such a great topic. I feel like we could talk for a few more hours. So
I would just say as like homework for listeners out there, definitely research IPFS. This is not a sale or investment advice at all. Like this is purely technical recommendation here. But look into IPFS and look into unstoppable domains along with ENS domains. Due to the resiliency that is afforded by those platforms. And I'll leave it there.
Unstoppable domains sounds awesome. I'm definitely going to take up that homework assignment too, Ken, because that's some cool stuff, man. And I really do see NFT as, or at least some evolution of it, maybe whatever is the next generation next of crypto becoming the new internet. So, it's good to be getting in on this stuff now, man.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah, Ken, we really do appreciate your time, your expertise on this. We'll definitely cover some more NFT stories. I mean, this is only the tip of the iceberg, I think. And as more money pours into it, the hackers, the threat actors, they're going to see the opportunities. So Ken, if someone wants to reach out to you, what would be the best way? Twitter, or how can they get in touch?
I prefer Twitter. A lot of good information is going on out there right now. So my handle is They Call Me Ken, just real simple. Or you can as well reach out via Instagram on Scent Space. That's SCENTSPACE.
All right. Well, we'll get those links up there. So if anyone wants to reach out, they can get in contact with you, follow you. Ken, you are a genius in this space. Again, we really do appreciate your time, going through this and lending your expertise. Josh, thank you for setting this up and going through the breaches in last week. And until next week, guys, thank you so much for taking the time to listen.